Welcome back. We just finished creating a query called Query Rich Accounts. We also have two tables, table account and table customer. So now what we want to do is try to have a very basic introduction to something that I call forms. It's right here. If you switch to the object view, you go to forms. Just to show you that this is a different way of looking at the data that's out there in the database. Okay, so for this, again, we need to create a new form. So you need to find a button that's an option that basically gives you different ways of creating forms. But for this, we are going to do something different. Instead of using a form design, right, like query design or table design, I'm going to be using form wizard. Okay, I'll explain why I go this route a bit later. Just trust me when I say this is going to be much easier for you from here on out. Okay, so both for forms and something else called reports in the next tutorial, we will be using wizards. Okay, so choose the form wizard option, and now you basically get, right, a guided tour of what kind of forms you want to create. Okay, and Access guides you through the process. The first thing you notice in the dialog box is that a list of all of the objects we've created so far. Okay, so in this case, let's say that we want to create a form to simply see the customer data. Very simple form to see the customer data that's present in the table customer. Okay, so we would choose the table customer option. Okay, now when you choose that, you would see that this automatically changes. The available fields basically reflect the fields that are present, right, in table customer. For example, if you change the object here to table account, you'll see a different set of fields. Okay, so let's switch back to table customer. So you have customer ID, customer name, customer city, and customer telephone number. You can either choose to have them individually, you can move them over individually, you're selecting them, right? And you can only have one or two of them. It's up to you. In our case, I want all of them in there, and I can do them all at the same time by pressing on these two arrows button. Okay, so I got all of them. Again, I want to emphasize, because it's just a view of the data that's present in the table, you could choose to have just two or three of these instead of all of them. Okay, so right now I have all of the fields from table customer, and I want them to be in the form. So I go to the next option. Again, it's giving me multiple options just to make it look, make it present the data in different ways. And I'm going to stick with the columnar format. If you want, you can experiment with these different options for the second table. Okay, but for the time being, for this particular form, choose the column form. Click next. So it's asking me what kind of title do I want for this form. Again, I like to use a prefix, FRM customer. Okay, and I'm done. So now it's automatically opened a form that basically shows the information that is present in the table that we just created 2 or 3 tutorials ago. Okay, and I'm going to go to the bottom of the screen here, try to see how many records are present, and you'll actually see that there are 2 records present, right? If you remember, when we created the table the second tutorial and we entered the data in the third tutorial, we only added data about 2 customers. Okay, so that's the information you're seeing here. The first customer ID 1, Jim, right? That information. When I navigate to the next record, so I see Kim from Boston, and if you remember, we did not enter the telephone number for Kim, and we can actually enter the information here, and it's actually nicer to enter the information here, in my opinion, in a form than in the table underneath the database. Okay, so let's enter, let's say 646, some random number, 1 2 3 4 5 6 2. Okay, so we entered this information, and that's the end of customer, right? So that's the information we entered, and let's say that Kim moved from Boston to Jersey City. So we also changed the city. So what do you think is going to happen to the data that's present in the table? Let's see. So let's close the form. So we actually created a form, right? Close the form. let's switch back to the tables, right? Table customer. So you see that Kim from Boston, the city has changed to Jersey City, and now Kim also has a telephone number. I think this information is not complete, so I'm going to have to move this around. Right now you can see the full telephone number. Okay, so we entered this information just a few seconds ago in the form view, and we see these changes reflected, right, in the table. And in fact, most of what we see in our everyday business needs is that people hardly ever work directly with the table. Not just because it's tedious, but also for security purposes. You don't want to give your employee access to every single table that's there. You only get them to see what they need to see, and you only give them permission to overwrite something that they should be overwriting, or only those people who have permission to create a new customer should be able to create a new customer, right? So those kind of security details are very important when it comes to database. And as I mentioned, that is what makes a database much superior to, let's say, a tool like Excel, when it comes to managing and tracking huge quantities of information like this. Okay, so let's close the table. I'm going to say yes, save the changes to the layout. Go back to the forms, right? We have the form customer. Open the form customer. Okay, and let's try to navigate to the end here. So you see, I can navigate record by record, or I can go to the last record. In this case, it happens to be the second record, which is the next record. And you also have another option here that actually shows you, that gives you, an option to create a new record. In this case, it basically means you have permission to create a new customer, right? So let's choose that. Okay, and you see customer ID 0. Same things that we see in the table. So for example, if you deleted the 0 and if you did not enter any information, you will get an error message. And you try to move to the next record, you will get an error message saying it cannot be a null value, or this particular information needs to be filled in. So the error messages will be very similar because you're making changes directly to the table. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to change 0 to 3. If I have 1 or 2 here, I will get an error message, simply because customer ID is a primary key, and I should not be duplicating that, right? Then Access will give me an error message. So now let's type in Jeff, and let's say he's also from New York, and the telephone number, let's say I'm not going to fill this in for the time being. Okay, so we fill this in information. We created a customer name, Jeff, ID 3 from New York. Let's try to close it form. Go back to the table. Open table customer. You should see this. So you have created the third customer called Jeff from New York. Okay, so it's a nice way of working with data using forms. Also has security reasons, and also as I mentioned a few minutes ago. Okay, so let's switch back to the forms. Okay, and when you have time after you finish the tutorial, try to do the same thing for accounts. Create a new form called form accounts and try to see if you can make some changes to that form. Okay, I'm not going to do that for a tutorial, but I would like you to do it. But before we sign off, I want to show a couple of interesting things when it comes to forms. Okay, remember, we use the wizard, right, to create the form. This is literally the view where we see the data. What about the design view? Can we see the design view of the form? Let's try that. So I go to the form view. Okay, let me move to the design view. Okay, so you see that if we had chosen the design view, you would have manually created, like you would have created something called a label, right? Just to type in some descriptive information here. You would have created this manually. It would have been much more difficult. Okay, and if I want to make changes to it, I can actually make, this is a descriptive label, and I can actually say customer ID. It does not matter if I don't have this label in the table, because this is really what the data is, really what is important. That's there in the underlying table. Okay, but I could change the label here if I wanted to. Okay, so, and then I can also change the title. If I want to change this to, let's say, customer data, right? And I can actually make it bigger. You don't have to do all of this. I'm just showing this to you, okay? But it's good to know that I can actually come back to the form view, right? I can even move this around, but I advise you not to do this. That's one of the main reasons why, I try not to do it, because if once you move it and you try to realign them, it's very, very difficult. It becomes very annoying, okay? So I advise you strongly not to move this around. So I'm just going to press an undo button so that it goes back to the original position. But I kept other changes, okay? And I'm going to save the changes by simply closing it. So just remember that you have the option. You have a form header, the form detail, and you can even have a form footer if you want some other information to be there in the footer, much like the header and footer for your Microsoft Word. Okay, so let me close this. Do you want to save changes? Yes. And if you reopen this, you should actually see the changes. If instead of FRM customer, right, that was the title here, I changed it to customer data, which is a little bit more reader friendly, and the label actually changed to customer ID, but the data did not change, because in the design view we are only working with the design aspect of the forms. Okay, so I hope that's clear, and I'm going to close the forms now, but I would like you to create a new form called form accounts and do similar things that we tried with the customer form. Okay, so see you in the next tutorial when we discuss reports. Bye.